They did their jobs with courage, grace, tenacity, humility. 18 years later, do yours.
Well, that was Jon Stewart this week on Capitol Hill in what became a viral moment demanding Congress extend funding for the program that provides health care to first responders who became so ill after 9/11. Jon joins us now from New York. And Jon, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having me.
How emotional was that appearance before the committee this week, along with the first responders?
I mean, it's terribly emotional. This community, the 9/11 first responder community from, the Pentagon, Shanksville, and New York, the Trade Center, they've been through an incredible ordeal, almost solely because of the heroism that they displayed on 9/11 and in the months following 9/11. And, when you're with these men and women, when you've worked with them for a long time, when you've advocated with them for a long time, everybody becomes very close. And we lose, last week, seven first responders died due to 9/11 related illnesses. It's a very emotional issue. I think this community is at the end of the rope. I think there's a feeling of disbelief that they can't understand why they have to continually saddle up and ride down to Washington and make these appeals for something that that should be simple, but is somehow through politics made agonizingly difficult.
All right, let's, it's tough in this kind of a situation to talk about money, but money is a factor.
Sure.
Payouts from the fund have been capped at $7.5 billion, and the fund, this is the Victims' Compensation Fund, ends at 2020. No more claims after 2020. You want to extend the fund through 2090, basically through the lives of all the people who may have become sick, and to keep it open-ended through 2090. Any idea how much that would cost?
So the CBO is only going to score something over a 10-year period. They haven't gotten the score in, and my guess, and most people are guessing, 10 to 12 billion is going to be the figure that comes through. But remember, that's over a 10-year period. And then extending it past that, the VCF part of this is going to get smaller and smaller, because even for the first the first responders of the 9/11 community, the average age now is in the 50s, where it was, 36, 37 on 9/11. So, if you're looking for a sunset clause on this bill in terms of funding, it's there. The sunset clause is death. And so many of these individuals are sick and dying that, when we talk about just extending it through 2090 to go along with the health care fund, that's just to ensure that none of these men and women ever have to come down and hat in hand beg for this kind of thing again. But realistically, the money for these funds will slowly diminish. Not necessarily the health care portion, but the VCF portion will get smaller.
Let's talk practical politics, because that's, of course, in the end what this is all about. It's very likely that the House is going to pass the full bill that you want, extending the program through the lives of these people. Then you have to go to the Senate. And in your testimony, you said that a certain someone, by which it appeared that you meant Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, cannot be allowed to use this as a, quote, political football in negotiations on other spending bills. Have you had problems with Senator McConnell?
Yes. I mean, not me personally, but in terms of getting the 9/11 bills passed, Mitch McConnell has been the white whale of this since 2010. In 2010, and this brings up something, because I think it's the cynicism that's displayed by Washington that also causes this situation to be so emotional. They asked Mitch McConnell about the testimony after it was done, and he said, gosh. I think he used the word gosh. Gosh, we haven't looked at that in a while, but we will look at it, and I'm sure we'll deal with it as compassionately as we have in the past. But I want to make it clear that this has never been dealt with compassionately by Senator McConnell. He has always held out until the very last minute, and only then, under intense lobbying and public shaming, has he even deigned to move on it. This is not a Republican-Democrat issue. There are Republicans on the bill. We'd obviously like to have more of them. But Senator McConnell has seen fit to, in 2010, he used it to make sure that the Bush tax cuts would be permanent. In 2015, he took it out of the transportation bill because he wanted to extract some promises on oil imports. And so in this bill right now, in 2019, he's been aware of this. We were told in August that this fund was running out of money and that people were going to have their awards slashed by 30, 50, up to 70%.
I got less than 3 minutes. I want to get two questions in.
Sure.
First of
Sorry.
all, some of the critics, and mostly Republican senators, say, one, that the fund should not be open-ended, and two, they say, look, this should be handled by the states, not by the federal government. Briefly, your response to that.
Okay, it should be open-ended because cancer doesn't have an expiration date on it, and the gestation period of different illnesses goes along different words. The idea that this is a state issue, 9/11 was, it would be like after Pearl Harbor saying, you know what, we're not going to do anything for people in Pearl Harbor because that's a Hawaii issue. This was an attack on America. As I said in the meeting, they didn't shout death to Tribeca. And to try and push this off as a New York issue, and I think they do that because they believe New York is reliably liberal and democratic, and it's not as important to them. Not all Republicans oppose this, but everyone who has opposed it is a Republican, and it's unacceptable. And they've done it now for years. Senator McConnell, Lindsey Graham is the one who's the head of Judiciary. He's the one who's going to be negotiating, whether it's 5, 10 years. We cannot make these individuals continue to live in the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing that these programs will be extended and that they will be able to move on with their lives. And it has to be done.
A little bit more than a minute left. You have spent years, oftentimes in satire, commenting about Washington and politics. What, in a real way, as opposed to commenting from the anchor chair,
Right.
What have you learned about our politics from this experience?
It's interesting. I've learned, so I come from the world of show business, and I think if you were to take all the arrogance and entitlement and elitism that people don't like about Hollywood and show business, and you concentrated it in one city and gave those people actual power, that's Washington. There's a tremendous amount of people down there doing great work with goodwill, but there is a very small, concentrated group of people at the top that have lost sight of what they're there for and how it looks to the outside world. They criticized us for saying, you're so upset that it's an empty Congress, but this is just a subcommittee. We knew it was a subcommittee, and they said 12 out of the 14 people were there the whole time, but they weren't. You get marked as present on this subcommittee, showing up for just a minute. When Lou Alvarez was speaking, when Mike O'Connell was speaking, there was only 6 members out of 14. 7 members out of 14. That's a failing grade. And that shouldn't happen.
We got to leave it there. John, thank you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll stay on top of what happens to this measure in the House and in the Senate.
Much appreciated.